Hello, everyone. How are you? I'm Erica M., and we are very excited, or I am very excited, to have you here joining us for our very special Facebook Live. I'm the publisher of YMCA, and I'm the mother of two teenagers. So tonight we are talking teens and sleep. And so I want to thank you so much for joining myself today, and also Dr. Colleen Carney, who is our special guest. First of all, you've given me a reason to get dressed, to get out of my pajamas, to brush my hair, which is always nice. Tonight, I promise this conversation is going to be super useful. Before we get going, here's what I want to do. If you're watching this in the repeat, what I'd like you to do is please jump into the comments and just type in the word repeat. Okay, if you're live, hello, so glad you're joining us. Now, what will be really helpful is for you to jump in the comments and tell me what age your kids are, what age your teen or tween is, so we get a sense of the demographic of the people that we're talking to, and I think it'll make the conversation a little more useful for you and for us as well. So if you're just joining us, jump into the comments right now. And of course, you can say hello. You can tell us where you're from, where you're watching from. But most importantly, please tell me what age your teens or tweens are. It will be really useful for all of us. Hi, Tamara. Hi, Mary. Hi, Cara. Andrea, this is great to see you. Maria, Sarah, I can see all of your comments, and this is really, really fantastic. So I see we're getting a great mix of 18 to 11 to 15, 13, 12, 9, lots of different age groups. Keep it coming and keep on letting us know what age your kids are. I think it'll be really great. So in a couple of minutes, I'm going to introduce to you Dr. Colleen Carney, who is really an expert on the topic of teens and sleep, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm going to tell you more about Dr. Colleen in a couple of minutes. I'm going to warn you, though, that the research that she has shared with me is kind of shocking, very surprising, really counterintuitive to everything that I believed as a parent and getting your kids to sleep. So we'll be talking about that in a couple of minutes. So as I see you posting all the different age groups of your kids, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a mom of two, as I mentioned. I have a 16, almost 17-year-old daughter. Help! And my son is 19, but in about 2 weeks, he's going to be 20. No longer a teenager. How the hell did this happen to me? I'm not old enough to have someone who's past the age of being a teenager. Anyway, that's a personal issue I have. So what happened in my life is when the pandemic hit, my daughter's and my son's sleep patterns completely changed. Basically, they stayed up till all hours of the night and got up really late every day, like in the afternoon. And I let them because I figured I don't want to fight with them. First of all, there was not much to wake up to or for. And secondly, we're living in very close quarters, not a lot of leaving of the house, so I didn't want to fight with them. And so their sleep patterns got totally messed up. And when we talk today with Dr. Carney, that's something that I think will be really important for all of us to talk about. Did it happen to you? I'm guessing it happened to you as well, this pandemic sleep pattern changing. We'll talk to Dr. Carney about that. I also want to talk about the amount of sleep that our teens really do need. There is a connection between sleep and depression, and I want to learn more about that. And I guess what we're all thinking about is how the heck are we going to get our teenagers back on a sleep schedule for whatever school looks like in a few weeks. Before we get started, I do have a request for you, and this is really sort of a thing, parents of teenagers, we need to stick together. So if you have a friend who is on Facebook who has a teen or a tween, it would be really awesome if you can invite them to this conversation. what you can do is either press the share button right now and invite them in. If you run a group, you can share this conversation in your group. And if you're way too lazy or not technically able, what you can do is just go into the comments and type your friends' names into the comments and invite them into this conversation, because trust me, they will thank you for this. Also, you can share it in a group like I just did. I wanted to let you know that I run a very private Facebook group for parents of teens. It's called Parents of Teens Survival Group. For any of you who are in that group who are watching right now, hi. If you haven't joined this group, you really should. It's private, it's free, it's just a Facebook group, but I started it because I wanted to have a safe, quiet, safe space that no one else can see, where we parents can talk about the realities of raising kids. And it's a really lovely group, very supportive and lots of great information. Okay, so let me introduce you to Colleen Carney, who is our very special guest today. She is an associate professor and director of the Sleep and Depression Laboratory at Ryerson University in Toronto. She is the current president of the Association for Behavioral and Cognitive Therapies, Insomnia and Other Sleep Disorders Special Interest Group. She is the author of the book you all should be getting today, which is called Goodnight Mind for Teens, Skills to Help You Quiet Noisy Thoughts and Get the Sleep You Need. And most importantly, she is the mom of a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old. So let me invite Colleen into this conversation, and hopefully there she is. Thank you, technology. It always freaks me out when I have to invite my guest. How are you, Colleen? Oh, can't hear you. I muted you, and now I'm going to unmute you. So how are you doing?
I'm really good. How are you?
Good. Where are your teens right now?
They are up at the cottage. So I am sequestered here by myself.
I'm the opposite. I'm at my cottage and my teens are back at home. I think I got a better deal. Sorry.
Yeah.
So here's the plan. I've got a ton of questions to ask you. And also anyone who is watching right now is welcome to throw in any question that they want or that you want into the comments. And so we can answer everyone's questions as well. So I'm going to get the ball going right away. I know that you've always been interested in the connection between sleep and depression, as your title shows. But I'm curious, what is the connection between sleep and mental health in general?
Well, that's a great question, because there's a very tight connection. So sleep is one of those things that often goes awry first. And sleep is one of those things that also, if you treat effectively, often we can get an improvement in something else that's going on. So the obvious ones are depression, anxiety, and substance use. It's also an independent predictor of suicide or having suicidal thoughts. And so oftentimes people have thought, oh, well, it's happening with another disorder, so we'll go after the other disorder. And we have found that that's a really bad idea, because oftentimes those people don't do as well in treatment. And of course, other disorders, I saw a couple of people in here who had teens, and I saw a tween with ADHD. And ADHD and a couple of other diagnoses go hand in hand with certain sleep complaints that we'll probably talk about tonight. So there really is a close relationship.
So I have I have many questions for you, but how did your interests go from sleep and depression to a deep interest in teens and sleep?
Yeah, so I was working with adults, and I'm on a university campus, and a lot of young adults are coming in. So I've got 18 to 25-year-olds, and they look a lot like teenagers in their sleep problem, and they have some unique things that I think parents can relate to. So I've got the parents complaining, but not the young adult complaining about their sleep. So this is a very common thing that I see. And I also was noticing that my adult treatment, which is extremely effective, doesn't work that well with them because my treatment is, oh, well, we want to increase sleep drive, so we're going to decrease the amount of time you spend in bed. Well, a teen loves that. Get up when you can't sleep. They love that. They're going to get on the internet. Wait until you're sleepy. Well, that's not going to happen until 3. By and large, I started noticing that we needed a different treatment. And right around the same time, somebody out of Berkeley was coming up with a really good treatment that she used in people with bipolar disorder. But because of the extremes in body clock that we see in teens, it worked really well with them.
That's so interesting. So bipolar and teens, same treatment.
It really is. I mean, there's very, very little differences. And so I started thinking, okay, well, we need some place then to refer some of these people, these younger people that look like teens rather than young adults. And I wasn't finding anything for them. I couldn't find any experts. I couldn't find anywhere to refer them. And right around that time, CIHR came out and said, we want a solution to a mental health problem in teens. Teens want apps, they want self-management, they want to do it on their own. And I thought, this is a perfect way to do this. I can solve the problem of them not having any treatment, and I can use a treatment that's more geared towards them, and put it in their hands since there doesn't seem to be experts for them.
So one of the reasons why we are having this conversation is because of this crazy pandemic it's really played havoc with our kids sleeping because they didn't have to get up to go to school or to go to work. And so they basically went to bed really late, didn't get up early. I don't know if anybody else is having this. Actually, let me ask, is there anybody watching this who has had or is having issues with their teens and since lockdown? I'm just curious, is it just me? Because my daughter, for sure, both my kids, they basically have completely gone off the rails when it comes to sleep. So I see it's very quiet in the comments. So maybe it's just me that's having this problem. So what is the correlation between? Oh, okay, Patty, thank you. I'm just going to prove that it's not just me. Patty just said 100% the same.
100%. Yeah.
I feel, thanks, Patty. That makes me feel much better. Oh, and also we have Tina is doing it. Okay, now they're all coming in. Thank God it wasn't just me. Thank you for that, Patty, for getting the ball rolling. So the question is, you completed some new research specific to sleep and teens in the pandemic. So what did you find out?
Well, it's interesting because we were in the middle of testing that treatment, and then we'd finished, and literally 2 weeks later, we went down lockdown. So we reopened it, and then we're able to collect data all the way through that period. And what we found is that teens were going to bed later. They were sleeping in later. So it's similar to what you're saying, but they were getting more sleep and they were feeling better, and there was less depression and anxiety in them. There was also less variability and less need for naps. And less need for naps is a good thing because teens shouldn't need to nap. Oftentimes they do because they're sleep deprived. But in an ideal situation, they don't nap and they don't need to nap. And so this is what we found. And so it's interesting because, and I'm seeing in the comments where people are saying that the patterns are so kind of out of it, and they're suddenly like night owls and all that sort of stuff. But they probably were night owls before because that actually happens with puberty. It's hormonal. So they shift over late, so they get sleepy late and they wake up late, but we enforce a schedule on them that actually doesn't match them. And so this is probably why they slept better during the pandemic.
And also because they got no pressure.
I think that's a big thing. I can't help but notice we have one of the leading experts in pediatric anxiety in the chat room, Dr. Deb Roth-Ledley, and a couple of us were chatting on Twitter, and she was one of them, and we were saying, a lot of our clients, because there's no pressure There's no performance anxiety about going to school and having to get up and so on. So there was actually a decrease for some. For some, the pandemic absolutely increased anxiety for them. But for a lot of clients, it was interesting. We were expecting a different response. I was expecting a lot more insomnia, a lot more anxiety. And interestingly, a lot of the pressure was off.
Yeah. So you have done a lot of interesting research on teens and sleep. And I would love to hear if you can give us the highlights, which is why we're all here. There's almost 100 people here who are listening to this conversation right now, and this is what we came for. Can you give us some of the highlights of what you have learned about teens and sleep?
Well, I think in order to tell you what I've learned, because I've learned a lot, I have to give you a little bit of a context. So I told you that I received this grant to develop this treatment app with teens, and we developed it literally with teens. So we went to teens and said, "This is what we want to do. What do you think?" And they said they didn't like this, they didn't like that, and so we came up with an idea of what we're going to do, and we built it, and they didn't like it. And what they really wanted was the treatment to be completely in their hands. So they did not want me telling them what to do. They did not want me to be setting their goals for them. And what they wanted was they wanted an app that would track their behaviors and their patterns so that they could learn about their sleep, that they could pick and choose what they were going to learn about sleep, and then that I could give them feedback, but they would decide of the feedback what they wanted to work on. And I have to say that I thought that the idea was a little ludicrous. So I was a little bit scared. I went into the literature and I found that, you know what, in other areas of mental health with teens, this works the best. So what we find is that teens don't actually often tell their parents. They definitely don't tell their family doctor, and they don't want to see a therapist. What they want to do is they want to go on the internet and watch videos and maybe try apps, maybe read, and they want to solve the problem on their own. And they want to be in control of that. So it's what we call self-management. And I have to say, I didn't want to trust the teens to make choices like that. I wanted to be able to tell them what goals to set. But I decided, okay, well, we're going to give it a shot because if we're doing the research, and then we can, if it doesn't work, then we can adjust it. And then we did the study, and we found that they logged on every day. They would complete the tracking information. They tracked all their behaviors. They stayed on for the 2 weeks so that they could get a full analysis of what their issue was. And then they did actually set on average at least 2 goals. And then they tracked it over 2 weeks. And then they accessed all the tips and resources that we had. We could track to see if they were looking. They were. Most of them would look to see if they were how to wind down, like how to turn off a noisy mind. That was like number one. And the other one was like how to get up in the morning. Those are the 2 biggies. And then at the end of the 2 weeks, if they weren't happy, they would either tighten up the goal, try something else, or move on to a different one. And I mean, so it worked. It worked exactly the way that they said it would work. And it was about 55 teens that did that. And what really blew me away is that all of the research that I was reading prior to developing the app, that they won't see a doctor and that they do have these significant problems. Most of them had significant insomnia, significant levels of sleepiness, which really makes us really nervous, especially with drivers, young drivers. They had significant levels of depression and anxiety. I think 8% were seeing anybody, like either a family doctor or a therapist. So even though I think all told, when we look at all the diagnoses, that 90% of them seem to have met criteria for something, almost none of them were getting treatment for it. And then we asked, well, what are you doing? And they were all looking online. So there was just so much that sort of played out. So it was an effective app. Their sleep did get better. They fell asleep faster. They were successful in their goals of being less variable. Getting up in the morning continued to be an issue for them, but they got a little better about it. They were less sleepy, less depressed, less anxious.
Okay,
So
we have
that,
a
that was great. And then we looked at during the COVID period, and we were wondering if it would be any different. And interestingly, the people during the COVID period had less levels of insomnia, less levels of depression and anxiety, which was really interesting. The same thing. They logged on every day. They used it exactly the way we'd want to. They liked the app, but they slept more. They did go to bed later and get up later, but they rated their quality as better. They were less sleepy, and they had less signs of sleepiness. So they were napping less,
so
and their depression and anxiety improved. So
this is fantastic, and what we didn't tell people what it's actually called, which is called the Doze app, and we're going to put that into the comments in a few minutes when someone is going to put that in for us. But what I think what a lot of parents want to know is, and I think like this one is a really good comment from Kirsten, which is basically what sort of problems are are teens identifying with sleep? Like, what are you learning about the challenges that teens have, or is the challenge with the parents? Like, what is your take on all of the parents worried about their kids not getting enough sleep?
Well, in a nutshell, parents are in this really tough position because the only real information they get is better make sure that they get 8 to 9 hours of sleep.
Well, yeah.
And the thing about that is that I'm not sure how they're supposed to do that during the week. So what happens during puberty is this is going to happen because of hormones. They get shifted later, and so they can't fall asleep. So you can put them to bed as early as you'd like, but they cannot fall asleep at a time that would be reasonable for them to get 9 hours of sleep and still get up for an early start time with school. So that's why a lot of school districts have moved to later start times, because they get better mental health and better health outcomes and better academic outcomes.
Well, here Shalina says the problem is that school started 8 a.m. So how do they manage if they're going to bed so late?
Exactly. So the thing is that if the parents are focused on the amount of time to sleep, then that creates a conflict at bedtime, right? When in actuality, the problem that teens will tell you is that I'm not sleepy at bedtime, at the bedtime that my parents want, or even the bedtime that they want, because they're not. And what I try to tell parents is it really would be like me suddenly saying, your new bedtime is 7 p.m. and your new rise time is 3 a.m. It's very similar. So you would not be ready at 7 p.m. It would be very difficult for you. You'd toss and turn. And at 3 o'clock, you'd feel really lousy. And if you have a parent there saying, "Why don't you eat breakfast now?" you would feel so acidic and so grossed out because your stomach has a clock too, and it would not be able to do it. So really, what the problem is during the week they have what I call skimpy sleep. So they're not able to fall asleep at the time that you would want in order for them to get 8 or 9 hours. They have to get up, so they're sleep deprived. They fall asleep through classes. They're also young drivers, which is scary. They sometimes will try and nap during a spare or after class. And then it starts all over again. And then on the weekend, they try to make up for it. So then they have what I would call bloated sleep, which I am certain people can relate to, which is the oversleeping. So they've been sleep deprived all week. Now they're going for some sort of record, and which then actually makes it worse for Monday, because now they've overslept, and on top of it, they've gone to bed later and gotten up later, so that kind of rhythm of trying to get up earlier has been completely shot.
Okay, so like for example, Marianne is saying, so what is the learning? That not being in school is alleviating some of the stress? Is like, how do we dial that back now? And then do they need to be on a schedule? So what do we do?
Yeah, so if you're asking me right now, like to get back to school, should we put them on a schedule right now? And what I would want to know is how are things working right this second? Because it was funny, because when I first talked to you, Erica, I remember you saying like, oh my God, they're like going to bed so late and whatever. And I said, but how are they doing?
My daughter's doing amazing.
Right. And
She
mine
is doing
too.
amazing.
Yeah, she's crushing online school. She's a better mood I've ever seen her. And it's because she's able to sleep within her rhythm. So there's two ways of thinking about this. One is you could start slowly now by setting an alarm, like a half an hour earlier each week, until you can kind of get down to where it is that they're supposed to be. It's still going to be very difficult for them. I wouldn't do that, because this sleep right now is actually healthy sleep. So to fast track them to unhealthy sleep, which is what it is during school, we have to rethink this. We really do need later start times. But if we're going to have to bring them to school and then be shortchanged, why fast track it? Then there's a middle ground. You can say the week before school, set the alarm for an hour later than they have to get up during that last week before school. So it's not quite as bad. But really, what it's going to be like on that Monday, I guess it's Tuesday, right? Is it Labor Day? Whatever it is, the Monday or Tuesday that they go back to school.
It's probably going to be later anyway, so whatever, right? So
That's
on.
a whole other issue. But so what it's going to be like if you are now going to bed at 1 and getting up at 9, and you now have to get up at 6 or 7, that's a 3-hour difference. So that's going to be like.
And also, here's what Lisa says: you can't put a 16 or 17-year-old in a schedule because they're already too old. Like, come on, realistically, how are you supposed to do that?
That's right, Lisa, because the thing is that's why it drives me crazy when people try to give them either completely adult, or pediatric solutions. They're going to resent it. And as soon as they go off to school, to university, they come to see me, they're going to go hog wild and go way the other way. And then I'm going to have to see them because they've gone way, because they have such a negative thing about schedules. So here's an actual solution.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
I'm ready. Everybody get their pen, write this down.
It's going to be good now. Okay. So the thing is that rather than fighting about the amount of time in bed and the bedtime, where I would put my energy is really in the wind down period. So I would put a lot of energy into an hour or two. Definitely, if you have somebody with ADHD, it's going to definitely be 2 hours. But 2 hours is probably a good rule of thumb to a wind down. And adults usually only need 1 hour, but they might need 2 because they're going to be very alert. So in the wind down, you've probably heard to take away all their devices. I'd love to hear what people think and how people have had success taking away all of their screens and devices. I'm going to guess we are going to get a LOL or something in our chat. But anyway, that's unrealistic, and that's really perfectionistic as well. Would you be able to spend 2 hours, fill 2 hours before bed when you're alert, with absolutely, no television, nothing, just reading? It's very unrealistic. Let's see.
Kirsten says
all night. Gaming all night. I'm gonna say that is definitely a gaming all night is not a thing. Now that's a great point though, Mira, is that it depends what they're doing. So when we talk about blue light, what you have to understand about blue light, it is alerting, but the research that really has shown that it actually delays melatonin are very specific studies. They keep the teens in dim light all day so that they're really primed for light. And then they expose them for like 3, 4, 5 hours of bright blue light before melatonin gets released, which is in the early evening. That's not what your teen is doing. And so there are a lot of individual differences here. They can be on some devices, but it's what devices and what are they doing? So I think much worse than blue light, for me, my enemy is FOMO. When I've got a teen who cannot put down their phone because they're afraid of missing out on something, that requires a lot of work. So what I like to do is I like to come up with a list of all the things a teen likes to do in the evening. And then I want to make a list of, and I get them to do this. I said, which one is most disruptive? When Mira was talking about gaming, there's some gaming that's passive gaming, things like solitaire or whatever, where it's less disruptive. But when you're behind, for example, the gun, you're the active agent in a game, there's lots of evidence that that's really alerting. So not only do we have blue light, but we also have that sort of added element. So I would get them to rate what is the thing that makes the most alert and makes it most difficult to put down. A phone is difficult to put down if you're really worried that the world is going to collapse, unless you're like tracking it the whole time. So when I have that list, then the thing that's most disruptive is the device that has the earliest bedtime. And that device has a bedtime that's 2 hours before the stated bedtime. So all the other stuff they still get to do. And then the second least disruptive, then we're going to put away an hour before bedtime. And in that last hour, we would like them to concentrate on things that are more in the relaxing realm for them. And if it's watching TV, don't sweat it. Let them watch TV. If it's listening to music, whatever it is, have the wind down. We need to prepare for bed because they're not going to be ready. But then here's the key. You can't just do that. It's not just that. So you're giving up the fight about bedtime. You're just working on the wind down before bedtime. Then when the morning comes, we have to set a limit because they have to go to school. So the alarm goes off. And you guys can negotiate what you're going to do in the morning. But it shouldn't be the alarm goes off and you're like expecting them to get up like that. They should have a time limit about how long before you come in and put a blind or whatever. And by the way, expect them to be bears because they're not done sleeping. And it's the same thing as somebody coming in at 3 a.m. and waking you up. You wouldn't be a sunshine either. So working on the morning, once they get out of bed, focusing on having lots of lights on because it'll set the clock that makes it easier to wake up the next day. So focus on lots of movement and light in the morning, a regular wind down time, understanding that they may not be able to sleep at their bedtime, but it's still a bedtime and they can read or whatever it is that they need to do. But we're just setting the stage. But then on the weekend, things can't go hog wild because if you're trying to set this clock regularly, then on the weekend, once you get more than about 2 hours out, because 2 hours is what, here to Calgary, maybe? Toronto to Calgary, I'm thinking. That's a 2 hour difference. And that's enough to create some problems. But I like that 2 hours because it also allows them to get a little bit of extra sleep, which they need. They are sleep deprived during the week. And there's nothing you can do about that. That's just going to happen.
Okay, so this is interesting. What you're saying, all these parents have showed up to get, how to help your kids. And what you're saying is your kids will be sleep deprived.
Yeah.
So we need to understand that there's nothing really that we can do because the school starts so early and their actual sleep pattern requires them to sleep in, which is not feasible at this point. So in other words, our society has structured the times for kids, which doesn't allow them to be at their best. So let's all acknowledge this and move on in a way. Is this what you're saying?
Unfortunately, I am saying that. And so, along with that unfortunate health-related piece of information, now, you also have to remember there are individual differences. Okay. So I'm an early bird, and that's genetic, okay? And so when I was a teen and I went through puberty, I shifted later too. But for me, it was 10 p.m.
You're a nerd. Right. Dr. Carney, you're a nerd.
Yeah. So, I mean, when people say, let's do something at midnight, I'm like, I have not seen midnight since 1984. So there's no way that I can do that. So yes, I was a big nerd, but that was my big time to shine, 10 p.m. that I could stay up and maybe go to a late show. But so it's going to look, some of you are going to have some early bird kids who, when they go through puberty, they will shift, but it won't be too much. And I was not sleep deprived because I was able to function. because I could fall asleep at 10 and I got up at 6, so it was actually fine for me. But that's kind of, that's going to be, most teens are really not going to get sleepy until about 11, 12, and quite a few are going to get sleepy around 1 or 2. That's
Okay,
the way it is.
here's a good question.
Yeah.
Why are schools not on board with this research?
So many schools are on board. That's an excellent question. Many schools are on board. And this year in the United States in particular, before all this happened, there was a lot of momentum about later start times. And in fact, I know that there's a Twitter handle like that right now, where it trends every once in a while, and they just show all the data, because we're talking about suicidal thoughts, we're talking about absenteeism, we're talking about insomnia, there's so many different reasons why we should do this. And the reason why we don't do it is the lamest reason ever. They say, well, it's difficult to coordinate with the buses.
Well, this year there's no buses.
Right? I mean, we live in Toronto, there's not a lot of busing. Like, people usually take the TCC, but the reasoning for it is actually kind of ridiculous, or it's extracurriculars. But the problem is that we have to wake up and realize that what's happening is that people are using things like melatonin, and they're doing it to attempt to shift their kids. And they're taking it, if it's prescribed for you, you're going to be taking it at 5, 6 p.m. Those kids are, if they're doing extracurriculars, they may be drivers. So that's a risk. So there's lots of different reasons why we have to be careful about this. That's just why I say during the week, if they have to nap, then they should nap. They're sleep deprived. Whenever you're sleep deprived, that's an okay. If you have insomnia, that's not a great idea. But if you're sleep deprived, then we want you to. And sometimes they need to just to study. And another piece of information, a gift that I can give to parents, is that if you've ever been frustrated that a kid starts homework later or studies later, you have to understand that I could actually graph out their alerting signal from their brain for you, and you would see that it doesn't actually start a steep ascent until late afternoon, like 4, 5, 6, 7 o'clock. And so if you ever notice a kid start activating and actually starting to get their work done, they start getting criticized at that time for doing their work. But actually, that's when they start to feel most alert. So again, I keep bringing back to the same, if you're having trouble understanding, I want you to remember, if I said you have to go to bed at 7 or 8 and you have to get up at 3 or 4, how impaired you would be at different times. So this is just something that we do know, and many of us are working very, very hard on public policy to make the shift for later start times.
So this is the question. I saw a few people ask it in the comments, which is, how many hours do teenagers need? And as I'm asking this, I'm seeing your face change, because I know this is the question you find most frustrating. So those are really two questions in one. Answer the question and tell me why it's so frustrating for you.
Well, I don't know how much your teen needs, because I would need to do an assessment. But if you want to know the public health answer that what we perpetuate is, we say that we want them to get between 8 and 9 hours. And we say that because we look at like thousands of teens, and then we make these recommendations. But the fact is that when we look at those thousands of teens, and we graph them out, they're all going to cluster right around the 8-hour mark, right? And so the problem with that is that there are many of your teens are actually 7-hour sleepers, and it's perfectly fine. And you're beating yourself up, pulling your hair out, thinking you're terrible for not being able to get them to go to bed. And they're actually 7-hour sleepers. And they would know this. If they use the app, they would know this, because they would actually be able to see it over time. But the thing is that, and some of them, unfortunately, are 10-hour sleepers, and they run an incredible deficit during the week. And so the oversleeping on the weekend, you would see it as extremely pronounced. When you see a ton of oversleeping on the weekend, I think you also need to be worried about whether or not this is depression, whether or not this is something like sleep apnea, whether so I think there's other things to think about if they're significantly oversleeping on the weekend.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you have a book, and I think that everybody who is right here, can you hold it? Show it to me.
Oh, I don't know how to hold it up.
This is called The Goodnight Mind for Teens. And tell me about what is in this book.
Well, this book was actually written for teens, but there's a chapter that's actually dedicated to people who love them. But it was based on my work with the teens. So every time I would explain something with like really fully to the teen, they would say, no, we want the cliff notes. We want the cliff notes. And I was like, oh my God, I like, you really do need all of this information. And they're so used to on the internet, like being able to just like kind of click around and get the gist. So in the app, they only wanted the bare minimum. They wanted like little soundbitey things and like little, motivational little phrases. And frankly, it drove me crazy because I thought, you really do need this information. So I wrote the book to be an accompaniment on the website so that they could look at, but then it turned into a book. So I couldn't help myself. And also because I know that there's a lot of bad books out there. And I thought, this way they can use the app and it's free. But if they need a little bit more help, say they have depression or other issues, or they just need some extra help, like maybe they need some relaxation tips, and they just need more, then they have the full. This is the full treatment.
Awesome. Thank you so much. If people want to reach out to you for any more questions, where is the best place for people to find you? I think you're on all social platforms, right?
I'm all the social, so drcolleencarney.com, and I have a website, and I'm on Twitter, so feel free.
I'm just going to put your name up on the screen so everybody can see your name and get the full credentials there so they know where to find you. It really is so great talking to you. Very, very helpful. I want to see if does anybody have any last questions that they would like to ask Dr. Carney, and we will get to them right now before we go. Otherwise, I'm going to thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing your time, your precious time where you hid away from your children. You could have been partying until 10 o'clock, but instead you're with us.
It's my bedtime.
Sharing the great goodness. And for all the parents out there, I really hope that this is helpful for you and to understand really that we shouldn't be stressing out about getting our kids to bed. Am I right?
Yeah, I think you can let yourself off the hook. Work on a wind down and helping them get activated in the morning. And give up the stress.
Okay, thanks you guys. And if you want, share this, tell your friends about it, and tell them to chill out. Your kids will be okay. Okay, thanks so much, everybody. I'm going to just wrap this up, and we'll see you for our next Facebook Live very soon. Thanks a lot, Dr. Colleen Carney.